All right, everyone. Yeah, we're going to talk about vishing with it all the stinking time. It's fascinating to me because a lot of the vishing stuff is around psychology, and we're going to get into the psychology of this. It's very similar to the psychology of phishing, but vishing is, of course, the voice phishing side of things. So it's one of these things that we get just so often. It blows my mind how often we get these kind of calls, and the fact that we don't even regulate that or stop it in any way, it seems, in the US here. And things like spoofing numbers is perfectly legal. And we'll talk about that too, but it's a very interesting topic. So hopefully you'll learn a few things from here that maybe you haven't seen in other places, okay? I'm not going to get into a super deep like technical dive, but we are going to talk about the psychology behind it and how this kind of rolls around and comes to play with it. So starting out, my name Erich Kron. I am a security awareness advocate. Yes, that is a real title, folks. Basically, what it means is, I work for KnowBe4, and what we do is we do training. We do end user training and simulated phishing. We also have a vishing portion to our platform, which is kind of nice. But in working for KnowBe4, I get to take the experience I've had throughout my career and share stuff with y'all. I don't do sales, I don't do any of that stuff. I just get to share experience. That's what an advocate does. And so my background, I got started in security and IT back in like 1995, I think, is when I first got into it. I've worked in healthcare, I've worked in manufacturing, I've worked in lots of different industries around the world. And I spent 10 years with the US Army as a contractor at the 2nd Regional Cyber Center Western Hemisphere, which is super impressive to say until you have to answer the phone a lot. But there I ended up the security manager of that organization. So quite a bit of background there, done a lot of things. And to me, one of the things I've noticed throughout my career is people are targets, and people are far too often the area where things go wrong. So my passion is really on that side of things. Also, if any of you on here right now are CISSPs and have been for a little while, I was the Director of Member Relations and Services for ISC Squared for a couple of years. So if you remember when the CPE requirements went up, my name was on the bottom of that note. Just remember, I was the messenger for the board. It wasn't me making the change. Anyway, so I've been through a lot of things, seen a lot of stuff in my time, and that's where the vishing thing and phishing and all of the ishings are very interesting to me. So again, I work for KnowBe4. I'm down in Tampa, Florida right now, where it's actually quite nice for a change. Although we're looking at a week in the high 80s, I think, going ahead. So feel nice if you have nice weather out where you're at. So let's start with this. Let's start with these kind of attacks. Let's start with basically cybersecurity in general, right? And we go back to Sun Tzu. He wrote this little book, fairly recent, The Art of War. You might have heard of it. You may have seen a slide like this in just about every cybersecurity conference you ever go to, but that's because it is actually still very relevant. And it's kind of cool that all these years later, the same sorts of things still play out. And that says a lot about our human nature and who we are. But this quote, all warfare is based on deception. That really drives true here in all of this human targeting sort of stuff and the social engineering sort of stuff. And I've had people say, well, warfare is kind of a strong word. But the deal is, we are really in a state of warfare. So when we talk about the kind of attacks that are happening out there these days, they're oftentimes run by large gangs, especially in the ransomware side of the business email compromise. We're seeing nation states involved. I mean, just a week or so ago, we charged 6 people from the GRU, the Russian side, with espionage and cybercrime. Back in 2014, I think is when we first charged the Chinese. There were like 5 or 6 Chinese that we charged. So there's big players in this game. And that's something that a lot of people underestimate, is how serious these folks are and how talented they are and the resources they have available. So it is warfare. It's happening all the time. With vishing, I mean, if you have a cell phone, you've pretty much received some of these calls or attempted calls or text messages, the smishing side. It's happened. It just does, because this is just crazy times for that. So we're going to talk a little bit about how this deception comes into play. And the key things about this These are the three things we're going to talk about: the psychology behind vishing, some of the vishing attacks, and how we can defend ourselves. The psychology to me is very important. And I say this because if we understand how the attacks work, it doesn't matter kind of the game that they play around it, the pretext they use, okay? If we understand how the attack works and we can see the mechanics of it, then we can defend ourselves against it. I was at a conference a couple years ago now, and they had this magician. Now, this is a cybersecurity conference, and they had this magician going around, and he would like take people's watch off and do stuff like this when they weren't even seated. It was all sleight of hand stuff. And what he did to me, he had this little foam rubber ball, and he came up and he did a couple things, and then he had put my arms against my chest, and then when I opened my arms up in my left elbow, in the crook of my left elbow was that foam rubber ball, and I never felt him put it there. And I said, okay, now that you've done this, let's do it again. And sure enough, at that point, because I knew it was coming and I knew how the thing was going to work, or at least how the end state was, I could tell when he bumped my right shoulder to distract me. That's a focus redirection sort of technique, and then slipped it in. Then I could tell. So once I understood how it was, wherever he tried to put it, I could tell the things that were going on. It's the same way with scams. And that's what we try to tell people. Understand the mechanics. Don't focus so much on just the specifics for a certain one, and then you'll be able to spot the other ones. Now, the way that this all works, the psychology here, the first thing we have to understand is that our brain is actually the root of the deception, right? And our brain's job is to filter, interpret, and present reality. And we oftentimes think reality is, what we smell, what we taste, what we hear, what we smell. All of those are real. But what we don't understand is that our brain actually filters a lot of things as they get to us. Now, I can do whole sessions on this. I've done whole talks on this, so we can get really deep into this kind of stuff. It's fascinating to me. If you're interested at all, there's a series out there called Brain Games, and I want to say it's on Hulu now. But it's a fantastic series that basically explores all of these different things that our brains do that we don't even realize they're doing, okay? If you've ever seen the dancing monkey video where all this stuff is going on, there's actually a dancing monkey in the background. Nobody ever sees the monkey, right? Because there's this other stuff going on. It's amazing, this kind of stuff, and you can see it there. But this is what our brain does. It interprets and presents reality to us. And these filters are things that are built by by ourselves throughout our lifetimes. It's through the experiences that we've had. It's the things that we've done where we've seen something happen and then something else happens. We've seen it happen a couple times now. We always expect that when A happens, B happens afterwards. So we get in that kind of pattern and things. And so you can take advantage of these. And it's really, it's fascinating, like I said. Now, the first thing I'm going to show you here, when we're talking about filters, let's look at some examples here. First of all, what is reality, right? Who remembers the dress? Okay, so is it blue and black? Is it gold and white? Well, this was one of those things where, it fascinated millions of people. You have two people sitting there at the same monitor in the same lighting conditions and everything, and you're looking at this dress, and two people see it in a different color. Now, this was my wife and I, actually. We saw things in different colors here. I saw the blue and black. She saw the white and gold. Because she's not here right now, I'd like to point out that I was right, but don't go telling her that. But this was our brain filtering these things. And even once we saw a picture like this, where you can see them in both ways, if you go back and you look at the original picture, you're going to see probably what you originally saw. It's very hard to see the other one with that because our brain just filters it. That's what it thinks it sees, and that's the reality it presents, one way or another. The other thing was that audio file with Yanni or Laurel, if you remember that one. Both sounds were actually in there, and there are some things there that have to do with our hearing and different things like that. But when they separated out, you could hear both of them separately, but then put them back together, you're only going to hear one or the other. And the reason for that is once our brain gets that sound, it filters out the other side of things. It does it automatically. It's really hard for us to step in and try to actually bypass and go a different way. And last but not least, there's the autostereograms. And these, I'm showing my age here. These were real popular back in like the 80s, 90s sort of thing. I am that old. These are called audio stereograms or autostereograms, and they create the illusion of 3 dimensions. Now, in that mess of stuff that you see there, allegedly there's a shark in there. Now, I was never real good at these. I know people that were much better than me. Every once in a while, I could pick one of these out, but this one, I still haven't seen a shark, and I've stared at this thing way longer than I probably should. But allegedly, there's a shark in there, and I've been told there is. But what happens is you got to cross your eyes a little bit or whatever, and then this 3D image kind of like pops out. And once you see that image, if you come back to this thing in an hour or two, it's going to take you far less time to be able to see that image again, because your brain already knows it exists. It already knows how it's there. It already knows how to deal with these other patterns, and it will filter that out much, much quicker than it does the first time you try to see this. This is another example of your brain. And last but not least, if you take your eyes, you look down, look left, look right with your eyes, you probably didn't see your nose. Well, your nose is there all the time. If you're thinking about it, you can see your nose in your vision, but your brain actually cuts that part out. And it's the same for people like me that wear glasses. I don't see the frame of my glasses because my brain filters that out. If I start thinking about it, then I can see it, but otherwise we just don't see it. So you'll see a pattern here. The things that we think are reality are not always reality. And that's one of our problems that we have. It's a trait, it's just something that is. So these are the types of things that people take advantage of. Now I'm going to do something here next that's a lot of fun. I don't know if you've ever seen this done before, but we're going to do a card trick in PowerPoint. Okay, so let's get ready. Let's pop into this. First of all, I want you to pick a card. I want you to pick any card. Make sure you know which card that is that you're going to pick. And now through the magic of PowerPoint, I'm going to make your card disappear. And this is a magic transition. That's really what it is. So is your card gone now? Everyone should be nodding, right? Everyone should be nodding. And so how did I do that? How did I remove your card, figure out what card you had, and remove your card, over the power of the interwebs? Well, first of all, we start with this grouping of cards. And second of all, we end with this grouping of cards. Now that you have them here in front of you, what do you see? Well, if you picked it up, these are 2 completely different groups of cards. Now, in the second group, had I put in like 2 through 10, you would have seen very easily that it wasn't the same. But by keeping with the patterns, the color patterns there, the fact that I had you focus on the card that I'm going to remove makes you not pay attention to the surrounding cards. And then when we replace those other ones with similar patterns, you didn't really notice the difference. And the reason again there is I've got your focus pointed to one thing. That's a focus redirection thing. And these are things that once you get that focus on something, lots of other things can happen around you that should be signs that something's wrong, but they aren't. You don't see it. You don't notice these things. And these are all things that are applied in social engineering. And social engineering is the key behind Vishing. Now, again, I told you this was a very strong on the psychological portion, because if you understand how all this works, it makes sense then when you look at these and you can kind of tear them apart. Now, I love this quote. This is Elliot Alderson from Mr. Robot. I've never found it hard to hack most people. If you watch them, listen to them, or if you listen to them, watch them, their vulnerabilities are like a neon sign screwed into their heads. This is absolutely true. And you can see this with people when you're interacting with them. Think about group settings where you've met people that you don't know, perhaps. Imagine a day when there's security conferences that are in person. Okay, imagine this, and you're talking to other people. You can generally pick out what that person's traits are fairly quickly. Like you can tell the introverts from the extroverts pretty quickly, usually. The people that are a little bit quieter versus those that are a little bit more rowdy. These are all things that we see. Some of the things that we use in social engineering, you look at somebody and you say, hey, is this person subject to, say, aggression? So if I get aggressive with this person, are they going to back down or are they going to push back, right? And both of those are actually vulnerabilities. It's just a matter of which one you're going to take advantage of. So understand that it's not hard to do this with people. It's something that we can spot very easily. So social engineering takes advantage of our vulnerabilities. The other thing it takes advantage of is this. There's basically these two systems of thinking. Now, system one is our fast thinking. This is the stuff we use like 95% of the time. Our lives are run in system one thinking. This is where somebody kicks a soccer ball and it comes at you, you duck or you grab it, you catch it, or something along those lines. We didn't think about it. We didn't consciously think about it. We don't think about breathing. We don't think about any of that. It just automatically happens. That's system one thing. System two thinking is more along the lines of problem solving. So this is where we have to do math problems. That's system two, okay? Where we have to figure out how things work. We have to do all this, anytime we go into figuring things out or critical thinking, that's a system two side of things. Well, system one is fantastic. It gets us through most things. And this is where we build these filters come into play, where if something happens, we expect something else to happen afterwards, right? So if somebody kicks a soccer ball at you, you might have been hit in the head with a soccer ball before, so you know you're going to get hit in the head with a soccer ball, so you catch it or you deflect it or whatever. This all happens very quick. The problem with system one thinking is it's very error prone because it relies on that sort of thing. Where system two is where we actually do our critical thinking pieces, okay? Now, when it comes to these sort of social engineering attacks, what these folks want to do is they want to push you into the system one thinking because it is error prone, because this is where we get you focusing on a certain single thing and you don't notice the other stuff going on. Most of the time, the way they do this is through emotions. Emotions drive us into responsive system one thinking extremely fast, especially emotions of fear, concern, things like that. That drives us into the system one thinking really, really quick. And so it's important to understand kind of how these things work. We're going to talk a little bit more about, how these play into vishing attacks. So I hope you understand a little bit more of the psychology behind these and honestly why they're so effective, because we are human and they take advantage of these things. So we're going to talk now about some of the vishing attacks. The first thing you need to understand is in social engineering, there's the major social engineering attack vectors, the ishings, if you will, phishing, vishing, and smishing. So phishing is, we get the emails all the time with that. Vishing is the voice phishing. Okay, so like the IRS calls, and we'll get into that. And then smishing is the text message one as well. So that's where you get the text messages on your phone. Sometimes we see hybrids of these. A lot of times it's a combination of like phishing and smishing. We'll see a hybrid where you'll get a phishing email, and this is for the really targeted stuff, but you get a phishing email followed by a text message saying, hey, I sent you a message, can you check it out? That's a hybrid attack, very focused type of attack, but these things can be combined in different ways, okay? Vishing is a little bit tougher to do those with because you would recognize the person on the other end of the phone's voice, okay? And so that can be a real problem there. That's why we don't see it as much. Now, I expect, though, as deepfake technology gets better on the voice side, we're gonna start seeing some real-time vishing hybrids like this, where the person is going to sound like a CEO and say, hey, did you check this out? So expect to see these things being used a little bit more in the very near future as hybrid attacks as well. So these are the major attack vectors. Obviously, we're talking about vishing a lot today. Well, in vishing, one of the key things to a successful vishing attack is getting information about people. And so what do they use for that? It's called open source intelligence, or OSINT. So this is basically, you're going to go in, you're going to do some research on a person, because we have our blanket vishing stuff, but then we have the stuff that's a little bit more focused, okay? According to Wikipedia, they're saying here, it's public data, all right? This is what it boils down to, is open source intelligence is public data. It's not stuff you go buy on the dark web. It's not stuff like that. It's stuff that we put out there as part of our digital footprint. It's your social media profile. There's stuff in social media. There's stuff that you end up Googled on. Your name shows up in here, there, or whatever. There's all that stuff. That's open source intelligence. Now, OSINT is not always bad, and that's important to understand. Just like social engineering isn't always bad. And I'll give you an example of that. When we used to work in our office with our older security system getting in, like our door system, we used fingerprints. And because I do a lot of woodwork, I do a lot of hands-on stuff, my fingerprints are always getting messed up, right? I always got cuts and stuff across them. So my fingers don't work great on those systems. So our policy says if you know the person, you can allow them to follow you in the door. If you don't know them, then you need to have them do their fingerprint. Well, because I'm a public figure, people pretty much know me in the office, right? So because I know that when I would go to the door and I'd put my finger on there, I'd be standing there forever because my fingerprint just didn't work. What would happen is I started getting in the elevator in the mornings and I would move to the back of the elevator. That way, when we came up to the floor we're on, someone else would go ahead of me. They would scan their finger, the door would open, we would go in, right? They knew who I was. So it was perfectly good with policy. But it actually worked for our benefit by not having me sitting there with my fingerprint that doesn't work. So that's an example where social engineering can be used in a good way. Same thing with open source intelligence. If we're taking a new job or we're looking at moving to a new city, we're going to research that city. We're going to look at crime rates. We're going to look at this, that, and the other thing. When I moved to Florida here, my wife had a spreadsheet laid out with every school district she could find in the Tampa area roughly, and the school ratings and all this kind of stuff. That's open source intelligence. We're going to look at that stuff. And so again, it's not always used for bad, and we don't always equate it with that. But when we do research like that, we're gathering OSINT. The trick is the social engineers will do OSINT on you to find some vulnerabilities or something that they can use to build a pretext. So they're going to look at your hobbies, political affiliations. You may or may not have noticed there's some political stuff going on in the last year or so. Those are great things to get people with. So if you think about it, political affiliations right now has been a hot topic for a while here. And if you really want to get somebody emotionally disturbed or spun up, then you start talking politics with people. And so if somebody can figure out what your political affiliation is, they can use that against you a lot of times. And we've seen some very targeted attacks that do that sort of thing. And it doesn't matter what side you're on, either way. And why is that? Because it's such an emotional thing. Remember, we get emotionally spun up, we fall into the system one thinking, and it all goes downhill. Well, they build these pretexts. So they figure out some things about you, they figure out about your family, they figure out about stuff like this, right? And then they turn it into an attack. Now, the pretext is designed to make people feel more legitimate. They let their guard down because people think, oh, how do these people know so much about me? Well, they must be legitimate because they know what kind of car I drive. And so therefore, their car warranty must be legitimate, but it's not. It's available out there. They can find that stuff. And in this attack scenario, we've seen some interesting things done with pretexts. A couple of years ago, there was this happened a few times. I think it was Southern California, where the parents would get like an email or a call, and they would say, "I've got little Johnny, and if you don't send us some money, you won't ever see little Johnny again." And so these people freak out. They're losing their minds, right? And basically, what happens is these folks are able to go out on social media and figure out where their kids went to school. They could figure out what times the school was working, and stuff like that. And they would know where these folks are. And of course, when they told them this, it's like, if you call the school, Johnny's gone, call the police, Johnny's gone, right? And so these people were believing it. Well, they found this all out because it's public information. Little Johnny's over there, fat, dumb, and happy, eating lunch at school, and nothing's going on. This is the kind of stuff that happens with pretexts. It's very easy to find that information. It's not always that targeted, but it certainly can be. Now, if you've ever been to one of the conferences, this was DEF CON, where they had the social engineer village. Chris Hadnagy does an awesome job with this. So basically they get the person up there, they put them in that little soundproof booth, you got a mic, you can hear things on the outside, as you're listening in. This is all about, the key to this is doing the OSINT, doing the work and building the right pretext. One of the ones I heard, it was a transportation theme that time around. And what they did is they called up a truck stop. That was their target. And they said, "Hey, this is so-and-so. I'm from this other terminal. We're having a real hard time. Our drivers can't get on the internet." Okay. And so right there, that builds some sort of a mind or a thought process in the person at the other terminal, because they can imagine what it's like, or maybe they've experienced what it's like when their people, their drivers can't get on the internet and the stress that brings. So all of a sudden they're having empathy towards what's going on, right? So this person's going, I don't know what happened. We think maybe it was a patch or something that happened that caused this to go bad, or maybe something with antivirus. Are you running Windows 10 still or Windows 95? And so the person tells them what it is. Okay, and maybe it was the antivirus that's stopping this from happening. I'm just trying to make sure that you're not different setup than I am. So it's like, hover over the little shield or whatever in the corner. Oh, you use McAfee, right? So you see what happens there. They're building this using empathy, but the story is what really drives the success here. And the more they know about these folks, the more they understand, the more they can build camaraderie. Even things like, oh, what's your name? Oh, you're Joe? Yeah, my husband's name is Joe. Or my wife's name is Sarah, or whatever. They've used that, and so that builds that again, that similarity, that bonding between people. So it's amazing how much can happen just through the pretext there. And again, these take a lot of effort when you're doing this sort of stuff, but they'll do this to executives. We've actually done some stuff through KnowBe4 on some paid engagements where we targeted some executives. We had it was, I believe, 5 minutes of maybe it was 5 or 15 minutes of studying the person, gathering as much information they could, and then doing some of these attacks. And you wouldn't believe how many of these execs fell for these things, just because there was something simple like, hey, they go to their school, hey, I'm an alumni for this school as well, or we're reaching out from the alumni association, and we know that you graduated from the school in this year, blah, 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 and they start the attacks that way. It's amazing how that works, right? But there's so much information about people out there. It's really easy to make it sound real. Now, the other thing that these folks do, these scammers do, is they hide their identity. I mentioned earlier, it's legal to do here in the US unless done with the intent to defraud, cause harm, or wrongfully obtain anything of value, right? But because of this, I mean, if you go out and you look at, if you Google caller ID changer, there's tons of free sites and apps and stuff like that you can get. You can play, jokes with your friend. I'm calling you from the White House, stuff like that, right? It's just like spoofing email, names in email. It's that easy, and it's free. And on the right side, you'll see this is from my actual call log on my phone. Now, I used to live in Arizona. I lived in Tucson. And so I still have a Tucson number, but yet I live here in Florida now. And this has actually worked out to my advantage. Whenever I see a number that's a 520 area code, I know it's a scam. If it doesn't have one of my family members' names on there, I know it's a scam. So it actually makes it a lot easier for me to spot those when they come in. And almost every time it's something to do with your social security number or something along those lines. And the carriers are actually getting better at blocking this too, like the one that says scam likely up there. I get some of those as well. There's apps like RoboKiller and things like that you can do there as well. But again, this spoofing like this, they're doing this because it's supposed to be a local to me phone number, which I'm going to think it's somebody that I may know that I don't have in my contacts list, so I'm going to want to answer it. But again, in my case, it kind of backfires on them because I can easily tell. But you see how this stuff runs in. I had a screenshot once of the voicemails from the Social Security number scams, and I think I had 6 of them in 2 days, just back to back sort of deal. Now, what we're seeing lately, especially with the COVID and the whole pandemic thing going on, is a lot of calls that focus around the fake VPN login portals. So what they're doing is they're calling these folks up and they're saying, hey, this is so-and-so from IT. We need you to check your VPN portal. We're making some changes on the VPNs right now. Check this out. And so basically that's what people do is they end up going to what they think is a VPN login portal. And a lot of times they'll add like hyphen support or either after or before their actual domain name. So like in our case, it would be like knowbe4-support.com, or it could be support-knowbe4.com. all of those kind of fake registrations they're doing, and they're trying to get people to go there. It looks like their VPN portal. They put in their username and password. They think that it's working, and then boom, they've gathered their credentials. And obviously, with credential stuffing being a thing out there, we know how valuable credentials are, and it gets them access into the network because they can actually hit the real VPN portal at that point in time. But we saw there's a real big spike in this just recently with the COVID thing, because so many people were sent home so quickly and with such little guidance. And I'm not busting on anyone here, because it's something that we had to do to basically keep the wheels on the wagon, right? It all happened so quickly. We were all kind of forced to react in some ways that we didn't give everybody the training they needed or the understanding that they needed. You got somebody who's an older person that's been working in the same job in the same office for 22 and a half years, and all of a sudden they're doing their job from home. They're not used to that technology. They're not used to how that plays out. So they took advantage of that and built these pretexts around there that are very convincing and worked very well for stealing credentials for folks. So that's one of them. The social security number scams, like I said, I've gotten just a ton of these, and they seem to go in waves. And, everybody should know that your social security number doesn't get suspended due to suspicious activity. It just doesn't happen that way. However, imagine this. You're an elderly person, all right? Your social security income is most of what you make. That's your fixed income. For you and me or the younger generation, it's not a big deal for us. We just kind of laugh about it. But when they're talking about your only source of income, it can be very scary. And again, this gets people into a system one thinking. They're afraid, oh my gosh, all of my income's at risk here, because they'll say, it's been suspended, we can't pay you until we get more information. I thought this was interesting. In 2018, 35,000 people reported this scam with losses of $10 million. It's just crazy, right? And we saw spikes with this too also when people started working from home. And this is because sometimes the protections that we would normally have in the office aren't available when people are working from home. They get a hold of these other phone numbers. You're forwarding your phone number to your home number, et cetera, et cetera. There's all kinds of reasons why this happened. Pardon me. But it can be very scary for those people. So they think that this is an issue. It's usually a recorded message at first, and then you press a number to talk to a person. I don't know if any of you have ever gone through that sort of thing and followed the tree up a little bit. I've done it a couple of times, got a hold of the person, and I'll mess with them a little bit. One time I asked the guy, so if my number's been suspended, does that mean I get to stop paying into the system for a little while and I get to keep that 7%? And that's the point where they hung up on me. But usually what it'll do is it'll ask you to press a number, and then you'll end up talking to a person. And the people are very convincing. The scripts that they use are very convincing. They know how to answer the questions from some of these folks that may be not all trained up and don't understand what to ask or how it works. So they'll try to get information out of them. They'll try to get money out of them. They'll try to get all kinds of stuff from them. They want to verify the social security number is a key one there, and some other information as well. But these are very, very popular, and they work in certain communities as well. And I brought it up a little bit here, but when we look at these things and we go, I don't understand how someone could fall for that. That's just stupid. You look at this, it's clearly a scam. Well, the problem is, for some of us, it's something that they're unfamiliar with, and they're pushed into that emotional state. The other thing that happens with these that works pretty well is with people that have newly immigrated to our country. They don't understand how the processes work. They don't understand that, the IRS is calling saying that you owe them money, and if you don't go buy a bunch of gift cards right now and pay the IRS and iTunes gift cards, you're going to be arrested. Well, they don't know that's not how it works here. It may have worked that way in the countries that they came from, right? So you have these pockets of demographics that these things work extremely well on. And we have to understand that, and we have to cut people slack when they're the targets of these things and they fall for these scams, because to those people at that time, they're in such an emotional state, it's real easy to do that. And think about for yourself, if there's been a time you've been really upset, angry, sad, whatever, any of those emotions, how easy is it for you to be able to do critical thinking? It's very, very hard to get over in that system two thinking when you're so emotional. So please, let's cut people slack when we hear about these sorts of things. And then there's this one, I just couldn't resist putting this in there. The car warranty scams. I get these all the time. And so I love the little meme here, you know, this is kind of what it feels like. These are really common. They're usually after your information, or they're going to try to sell you a warranty that doesn't exist, right? The thing that gets people on this is they may know the kind of car that you drive. They use information like that they're able to look up and find out on people, and they make it sound more realistic, right? So some of these things are public record. It's not too hard to tell. You know, if you've ever bought a car from like a dealership, you are going to get flooded by garbage afterwards. It's like, heaven forbid you buy a home. All of the home warranty stuff and all this other stuff that you get flooded with mail afterwards. These lists are sold with some of this information. So they'll get a hold of this information and they'll say, hey, you know what? I'm calling you because your 2016 Challenger, the warranty is about to expire, which it really is. You know, and here's the deal, blah, 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 blah. Sometimes, again, they'll want information. Sometimes they just want money. They'll sell you a warranty that doesn't even really exist. But they use this bit of information to build that pretext so it sounds very, very realistic to folks. And then we can't forget about these, the tech support scams. And I see them on email, you know, or more like the malvertising pop-ups, but we also get the phone calls. My wife's had the phone calls. I've had the phone calls. They can be fun to mess with as well, you know. But the tech support scams, you know, hey, this is Microsoft. We care. And that's the first point. We know that Microsoft doesn't care. Other people may not realize that so much. But you have a virus and we want to help you fix your computer. Well, for some people, that's their worst dream. I'll tell you a little bit. My father-in-law, wonderful guy, love him to death. He is so paranoid with the computer. He's one of these people that believes that if he leaves his computer turned on overnight, the Russians are going to hack it, right? If it's connected to the internet and turned on overnight, it's going to get hacked. And so he's uber paranoid about this kind of stuff. So when something like this happens, you know, it would get his attention. That paired with the fact that my stepmom downloads every version of Mahjong you can possibly imagine. And I've actually had to clean up her machine a number of times with things that she's got on it, right? Mostly adware and stuff like that. But now if they get a call and they say your computer is infected and, you know, we're here to help, then they're going to want that done. Now, he's not very technically savvy, so they may go, oh, click on this, and you know, he doesn't know what he's doing. Well, let me do a remote access thing. Here, just go to this website, download this thing, and I'll take care of it for you. Well, they're emotionally in a state where they think that they've got this problem going on, and so therefore, what do? Well, they're going to step back and they're going to let this quote unquote expert fix their problems. So we see this stuff happen all the time. And honestly, I've seen this happen in organizations that actually had a tech support, like their own IT department. But what they did is when they went, like kind of like this one here, they started talking about, you know, you may have gone to a site, you know, like a pornographic site or something like this. And these people are all of a sudden like, you know, and they're afraid to tell their internal IT because they're afraid they're going to get in trouble. So I've actually seen people pay out of pocket to fix, quote unquote, fix their computers for folks, even though they had their own IT department. So that's another angle that this comes from. If they've gone anywhere, or they think that maybe they accidentally clicked on something and it showed something weird, I don't know. But all of these things kind of play together in that way. So again, you know, as security experts, sometimes we look at the users and we go, how could you fall for that, right? You know, the IRS isn't going to take gift cards. We know that, but we have to understand that in the mix of these things, these can be very realistic. I've had some recruiter type jobs where they've said, back when I was in Arizona looking for another job, you know, I was active on LinkedIn and I had these people calling going, oh yeah, you know, we want to submit you for this job, blah, 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 blah. I'm a recruiter with such and such. I just need this information and the last four of your social security number and we'll submit you for the job, you know, and you just feel like, like, okay, they have all the answers to why they need your last four. They have all this kind of stuff, but ultimately you just want to hang up on them. But they're very, very convincing on that. So again, they get you in that emotional state, they get you emotionally involved, and next thing you know, they're asking you for stuff like that. So how do we defend against this fun or not so fun stuff? Well, it comes down to education a lot. When it comes to the caller ID thing, people blindly trust the caller ID. So if it says the call is coming from the IRS, well, they're going to believe it's coming from the IRS because they don't know how easy it is to spoof that sort of information on caller ID. They assume that it's something that if it says one thing, it is absolutely that thing. So we need to let people know that this is the type of stuff that can happen, that this is not something that we take for granted, or that we understand that this is real, that it is so easy to do this. We also need to let people know that during certain times of the year, there's going to be different kinds of scams. So we need to kind of let them know that this sort of stuff is going to go on. We're heading into the holidays right now. We're going to see all kinds of scams uh, dealing with holiday-based stuff, right? With orders, with fake websites, with all kinds of stuff. You get the delivery messages from FedEx or whatever. You're going to see a lot of that stuff in phishing, but we also see it in the phone call side and the vishing side as well, where they're using the stuff that people are expecting to be happening around this time of year as their pretext. Same with the first quarter when we got tax stuff going on, right? So first quarter is all about tax scams, trying to get your social, trying to get your W-2 information, all that. And it's in phishing, it's in vishing, it's in all of those different areas. This is the IRS. Yeah, we going through things before you file this year, and we noticed that you didn't file last year, or that you were wrong last year. Now you need to pay a penalty before you can file again. Stuff like that we're going to see in the first quarter. So let people know this. Tell them these are the kinds of things you can expect. And just because the phone says it's the IRS, don't believe it. Tell them how to look up, go online to the irs.gov and look up the phone numbers to contact. And if it's real, they'll be able to tell you at that point in time. But never trust coming in that that's really like it is. Okay. And then again, like I mentioned, once you know how the scam works, you always know how to spot it. Let's go back to that card trick that I played. Even if I mixed up the kind of cards that were in there, which cards were in which order or whatever, it doesn't really matter. If I tried to pull that card trick on you now, you understand the mechanics of it. You understand how it works. Even if the details change, you're going to go, yeah, I know what they're doing here, right? You won't fall for that same one a second time. So it's important to understand, like I said, when we're teaching people, teach them the mechanics a little bit of these. Don't just focus on the specific details, because it will change sometimes what company they say they're calling from, right? It may be they're calling from Apple and your Mac has a virus, not calling from Microsoft and Windows, or it may be something saying your phone has a virus. There's all kinds of things like that that happen, that they change the pretext on it a little bit. And so if we understand how it works, we're much better. Now, the key things when it comes to training people and how these attacks work, both in vishing, phishing, smishing, all that stuff, these are the key things most of the times, the lures that they use to pull our strings. And that is greed, right? We've all seen the Nigerian prince scam. That guy's been trying to give out money forever. That was actually a scam before email. That was something that they used to actually put in envelopes and lick stamps back when you had to lick stamps. It was a horrible, horrible time, folks. But they'd actually lick stamps, put them on an envelope and mail them to people. And you think about what that costs them to do that versus what we can do in the modern day, which is send emails for next to nothing, right? Instead of 10 cents a stamp or whatever it was back then. As a matter of fact, I was out not too long ago out on the dark web. I was looking at some of the services available. And one of the things they had was, phishing services. So I come up with the email, I give it to them. They would send it out to a list of people that I had. I could send 50,000 emails for $65. Okay. You compare that back to the Nigerian print scam where you had stamps and you were having to mail them out and print the paper and all that. The cost is next to nothing now. But the work on the greed part, though in social media, I've seen it where, especially at the beginning of the pandemic, there were a rash of these going around. they would get into people's Facebook's accounts, and they would post to local for sale groups. Like here, I live around a place called Newport Richey. So like the Newport Richey exchange group where people would buy, sell stuff. And they would post up and they'd say, hey, check out this thing from Lowe's for the first, 10 recipients or whatever, or they're going to pull your name out of a hat, register for this. You get, I think it was like, what was it, 10 or 15 minutes or something of anything you could fit in your cart is free, right? And they had all these kinds of different things like that. And they were using that to put in there. And then the person would go to the link on there. It really wasn't Lowe's. It was a fake Lowe's page on Facebook. And then that would take you to another site where they'd ask you information and blah, 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 steal data, et cetera, et cetera. They'd string you on and along. But that was the kind of greed thing. Oh, look at all this stuff I can get for nothing. Now, curiosity, if you've ever seen clickbait ads, or you get the calls where they're basically dealing with your curiosity piece. So the clickbait, you won't believe what this person is doing, blah, 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 blah. And there's a picture of somebody and things are circled. They have nothing to do with anything. Or, the top 5 things that cashiers want you to do, number 3 will blow your mind. That's all the curiosity type stuff. And they'll get you on the calls too, like that as well. Trying to sell you things, scam you, get you places like that. Curiosity is a great way to do that. Self-interest, things that are going to help you, things that are good for you. And of course, urgency. Now in phishing or vishing or smishing, I have never personally seen an attack come through that said, whenever you get around to it, call us back, or, think about it for a couple days and get back to me. That's never going to happen. There's always a sense of urgency, and that keeps us in that system 1 thinking where we're emotionally charged. And again, that's very error prone when you're in there. And then fear, of course, fear of being thrown in jail, fear of being arrested if you don't send those iTunes gift cards to the IRS. Those are fantastic ways to get people going. And in the psychology side, to get people to do an action, 2 of the most powerful attacks, or the 2 most powerful emotions I know of to drive people into an action, are anger and outrage. Because people will back away from fear as often as they'll push up against it. But if you can get somebody outraged or angry, you can get them to do something. So like in the political world, what we have going on right now, you get somebody upset, you get somebody angry, you tell them that, hey, here's a petition to stop whatever it is I told you that they're doing. And again, it doesn't matter what side you're on. Here's a petition. And then they go to this place, and to make sure that it's valid, we need your social security number, your date of birth, the name of your first pet, your mom's maiden name. And people are like, yeah, I want to make sure this is valid, right? People will put in that information if you get them riled up enough. They don't even notice what it is they're putting in there is dangerous. And then, of course, helpfulness, right? So we're going to see this around the holidays, help the homeless, help people that don't have as much as you. During the holidays, we see anytime there's a natural disaster or unnatural disaster, you see these fake charities popping up. You get phone calls from people that are trying to solicit for these charities. This is so-and-so with such and such. I'm collecting on the behalf of such and such church who's dealing with the after effects of this hurricane, right? You look at Louisiana, who's just been hammered by hurricane after hurricane after hurricane this year. A lot of that stuff in those areas, there's a lot of scams going on around that type of stuff. So that's where the helpfulness stuff comes in too. So these are all kind of the key things that they use to manipulate us. And we got to teach people that when they get a phone call, they get a text message, or they get an email that elicits a strong emotional response, this is where we need to step back, take a breath, and try to apply that critical thinking. Get out of that system 1 and into the system 2 thing, and look at this in a critical way, detached from the emotions. And that's where you start seeing the holes in what's going on. So this is important to tell people, to make them understand that these are designed to get them emotional. And that's kind of the thing behind it. So that's about all I have for slides right now. I want to go to questions if we have any questions. I kind of see a few running through Discord here, but I am not great at keeping up on these sorts of things. So got any questions for me? And you're muted, John. I can't hear you.
Let me find my mute button.
There we go. Yeah. Brilliant.
So this wasn't in Discord. It's a question actually from me. Should I feel guilty utilizing these tactics in my security awareness training.
Yeah. So that's
I
a hard
should,
thing.
because I don't.
Well,
I feel terrible now.
no. That's a tough side of this. And it goes same with the phishing emails and the vishing and
Right.
stuff like that. So the key is, first of all, you have to understand why are you doing it. And when it comes to this sort of stuff, what I always want to tell people is, we're not doing this to trick the users. That's not why we're doing these sorts of things. It's not really to trick them. It's really all about taking basically what we've trained them and give them a chance to practice that in a fail-safe environment, whether it's through the calls, whether it's through the text messages, or whether it's through the emails. We're trying to help them do that. And we want to be very careful with what we're doing. We want to tell people up front that, hey, we know that this is going on. We want to make sure that you're safe and you're going to be subjected to these things. You always want to tell them that these things are coming in, right? You don't ever want to start doing these sorts of tactics against folks without letting them know it's going to happen, because then they'll be upset. But what you don't do is I'm a big proponent of carrot over stick, right? So you reward the good behaviors, and then you help the people when you do this with, okay, then these are the things you could have looked at. These are the things that could have been a clue to this in there, and you help them learn, but also let them know how this is going to help them in their personal life as well. And then they don't feel like you're just out to mess with them. Now, you have to be careful some of the lines that you cross in some of the things that you would use as pretexts, right? You try not to use their family in a pretext, right? Like, I have your child, you'll never see him again. Ha 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 ha, you fell for that, right? Nobody's going to be happy about that one, all right?
That's a resume generating event.
Right, that is a resume generating event.
Depends on their kid.
Well, yeah, some of them may be like, hey, I'm saving money now, but we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to understand what it is. Anytime we're doing a deception-based training like this, we really have to be careful and understand what that's going to be around. So stick with the stuff that's out there. Only use information if you're going to do a pretext on somebody and you're going to do something that's very targeted. Only use real publicly available information. Don't get into the stuff that you have in their personnel files and stuff like that, because that's not a fair thing to do either.
Right. No, and we aren't, for instance, in my current employment, we're not allowed to use COVID as a phishing vector.
Yeah.
Now I can give away free pumpkin spice lattes, and that one is painfully effective. But we're sad, really. It's disappointing. But
I want one.
I'm not allowed to do anything medical like that. I'm not allowed to instill fear. And initially I thought, man, this is the perfect vector. This is what's going to get somebody to click a link. And it's that curiosity. It drives curiosity. It drives fear, but it can also be part of the outrage.
Yep. And here's the problem with that is, when you are limited like that, the attackers are using that. Like, we saw a huge uptick in COVID related phishing in the beginning, and it's still going on, right? That's their attack vector. So if you tell people that's off limits, it kind of limits what you can do with folks. And it's really hard, because those are the real attacks they're going to be facing. And so I understand that's a challenge. Some places, it's how much risk they want to do, because we actually saw a situation not too long ago. It was with a newspaper, I believe, that had been laying off a whole bunch of people. And then they sent out something about, it was about like Christmas bonuses for folks. And it was a phishing email. And of course, it just went stupid. Like, oh, you're laying off people and blah, blah. And then you're going to turn around and do this. And, it actually hit Twitter pretty decent. And, that's one of those things. You got to understand where the limits are with your organization, as well as just kind of the ethical side.
Also on assessments, I've seen where things like porn and gambling are not in scope, and it's forbidden to do that sort of thing. I'm looking in the Discord for questions. Does anyone have any questions?
I do have a question. So somebody in Discord mentioned that they like to mess with them, and I think it's a very popular pastime for many of us. But number one, I don't think you'd recommend you do that at a corporation. Do you have some? Yeah, that's wasting time and money. Although it still is fun. But do you have any recommendations for people how to handle it? Do you recommend people mess with them, or
I generally don't, especially your end users, right? These are people that can, you know, that can get in there. When I get these calls now, and I know it's going to be something like the ones that I get from Arizona all the time, I just end the call. I don't even want to get on the phone because I don't want to validate that that's a real number either, right? So I don't want to validate that I'm the person there. They may ask me a question, hey, is this Eric? Yeah, it's Eric. And then you go mess with them. Well, you know, if you don't know in the beginning, you're giving up information like that. I just don't recommend it. And there's some argument for wasting their time. And so the time on the call with you is time that they wouldn't be with someone else. And I get that. I want to say, be very cautious when you do that, because you may be opening yourself up to other issues and perhaps repercussions. Not that I'm paranoid. Again, I've done it. I love to mess with those folks, but I don't recommend everybody do it.
Something, and I don't know what the legality of this is. I probably ought to look it up before I speak. The DTMF tones, the ones that indicate a call cannot be completed.
Yeah.
I used to put that in my voicemail.
Oh, nice. I like that. I like this. Hey, if you guys want to see something funny, I think it's on YouTube. It's This Is Lenny. Have you all ever seen that? It's a voice prompt system for asterisk phones, like an asterisk PBS.
Yeah.
Yep.
And basically it's designed to screw with telemarketers and scammers. And it's this old guy, and he starts out, this is Lenny. And they start, you know, he starts just like going off on these tangents and stuff like that. And it's just to mess with these folks and keep them online. So people just forward them to that asterisk mailbox and move on. That's not a person on there, so I'm more okay with that. But there are some hilarious ones where they're just screwing with these guys for 10, 15 minutes, and they record these calls, and the guys finally they lose their minds over it. It's fantastic.
I posted a link in the Discord about what happens when you respond to a spam email. It's classic. It's hilarious. If you've never seen it, check it out.
Awesome.
I don't see any other questions in Discord.
No.
Eric, spectacular. Appreciate
Thanks
your
for having me. Yeah, thanks for having me back. I mean, you guys even brought me back after I spoke once. That's amazing. Most people are like, never again.
And
we
we'll
hope
block
to
it off
see
for
you
next year.
We hope to see you. Yeah, exactly. We hope to see you soon in person again.
Yeah. I kind of miss that. I had a great
No, we're
time
not
at your
even seeing
conference
you in
last
person.
year.
I'm sorry. Justin was trolling me. I didn't hear what you said, Eric. Go ahead.
Oh, I had such a great time last year at the conference, meeting people and talking. I really enjoyed it. It's you know, this is one of my favorite shirts actually,
Hey,
and it still glows in the dark, which is the coolest thing ever, man. That's like the coolest shirt I have because of that.
Yeah, we used actual uranium for that, so
Did you?
it cost extra. Yeah.
That would explain those funny little tumors that I'm getting on my back, but you know, it's okay. And it's right over the heart too.
When you grow
It's all
wings and
good.
you become the Mothman, you'll understand what happened.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks again, folks. Thanks everybody. And you know, if you want to reach out to me at any time, I think my screen's still up. This is my contact information, and I'm going to drop at y'all's request. I'm going to go ahead and drop the link to the podcast that Javad Malik and I do every week.
Absolutely.
It's called the Jarek Show, which is the Javad and Eric Show. So we're super creative when it comes to stuff like that. So the Jarek Show. And we cover like stuff that's gone on for the last week, and we have a little bit of fun in doing it too. So we like to say it's timely topics poorly presented. So hopefully you'll check that out, and I'll drop that in Discord.
And I wish we could have taken that tagline for us. Right, exactly.
Yeah. Exactly.
I resemble that remark. Eric,
I believe in truth in advertising. So.
Awesome.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. I really appreciate it, and thanks again for having me.